Tomorrow is the Instagram Live, a Jane Austen holiday with Stitchin' Addiction, and we are each making 2 recipes, and I have selected 2 recipes from Dinner with Mr. Darcy. This is a cookbook by Penn Vogler, and I have selected on page 101 a dish called flummery. Now, in the Regency era, gelatin desserts, gelatin savory dishes were all the rage. No proper table would be without. And a few years ago, my friend Nicola had gifted to me these amazing molds, and they are antique, they are quite heavy, and you can kind of see they each have a different design. And then this is a smaller one. I'm not sure how much flummery this recipe will be making, but these are ready to go. And Grace has just come into the room. You may have heard her. Hi, babes. And so it was interesting when I was looking at the preparations for this recipe. It was somewhat mind-boggling. So from the cookbook, the experienced English housekeeper, dated 1769, to make flummery, put 1 ounce of bitter and 1 of sweet almonds into a basin. Pour over them some boiling water to make the skins come off, which is called blanching. And you may have heard of blanched almonds before. Strip off the skins and throw the kernels into cold water. Then take them out and beat them in a marble mortar with a little rose water to keep them from oiling. When they are beat, put them into a pint of calf's foot stock, set it over the fire, and sweeten it to your taste with loaf sugar. As soon as it boils, strain it through a piece of muslin or gauze. When a little cold, when a little cold, meaning when it cools off, put it into a pint of thick cream and keep stirring it often until it grows thick and cold. Wet your molds in cold water and pour in the flummery, and let it stand for 6 hours at least before you turn them out. And I'm thinking, what a way to blanch and grind down your almonds to get what I now can just run up. I got this at Trader Joe's. It's blanched almond flour, extra fine ground blanched whole almonds. So heck of a lot easier, a great time saver. The recipe also calls for your 5 leaves of gelatin, and I had never heard of leaves of gelatin, so that was a little bit of a hunt. And this is what I found at a specialty food store. It is a product of Germany. I lived in Germany for a few years, and they make unbelievable torts that are often gelatin based. So it's not surprising to me that Germany would be the one to make these. And you have to soften them up in some cold water. So I'll do that in a little bit. And for the rest of the recipes, I tried to use organic as much as I could so that it would be close to the ingredients that they would have used during Jane Austen's time. So we have organic cream and Goodman's almond extract. That's an all-natural, gluten-free, non-GMO. This is orange flower water that I had purchased in France the last time I was there. The French are also very well known for their delicious desserts, and you also do need a little bit of rose water. And this is from Silver Cloud Estates. I got that at the Natural Grocers. And castor sugar. Now, how this is a little bit different from your regular sugar, it's super fine. It's almost like a powdered or confectioner sugar, but there's still, you can see, there's still a little bit of a grain. When you are making a recipe, it just melts into the recipe much quicker. And this is a non-GMO brand that I selected. So the first thing that I'm going to do is soften my 5 leaves of the sheets of gelatin in the cold water. And so I'll stop the camera. I'm going to open this up and I'll show you what they look like, and we'll put the other ingredients on the stove for a low boil. Can you even see these gelatin leaves? They're really, I mean, beautiful in person. Here's, you can see them a little bit better when they're all grouped together. It's almost like a beautiful pane of glass. I'm gonna set those in some cold water. In the previous segment, I did not show that it also called for milk. So in the saucepan, we have the milk, the castor sugar, and the almond flour. And it says to heat it just below boiling, so I'm mixing it up well. And I'm gonna stop filming for a second because I also need to start whipping the cream. So I'm gonna get started with that. Gelatin leaves have now become pliable, and it says to take the excess water and then add it into the mixture. And so I'm just sort of, oh, it's just fascinating. It's like pliable. A rubber band is basically what it feels like. Oh my goodness. How fun. Well, sort of, it's gonna melt into this mixture. I wonder if the longer it stays in the water, does it disintegrate, or does it have to be in a mixture that is hot? Interesting. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit. Wow, yeah, it is melting. This is fascinating. I love it. Oh yeah, it's almost gone now. Fabulous. I don't know if you can hear me, but here is our rose water, and I just added the almond extract as well, so we'll mix that in. I think our cream is sufficiently whipped. It has a nice consistency, so we are going to now add it to the tepid almond mixture and mix it or fold it in gently. It says after it cools a little to strain it through cheesecloth or muslin, so I'm improvising. This is a very loose weave linen tea towel. So we'll just let that drain through there. It's a very interesting process. I do see, you know, for when you think about gelatin, you do want almost a translucent appearance. And by running it through the cloth, it gets rid of, you can already see there's a little bit of the flour mixture, you know, that is left behind. So I'm gonna taste it. It's not bad. So I'm going to gently squeeze. I think that will help things along. There we go. Yeah. My hands are clean. A little bit like milking a cow. And it definitely is going to aid. Oh yeah, so then you're just left with that paste. Okay, I'll keep doing this for a while. All right, so we have somewhat of a thick consistency, almost like yogurt that's been out on the counter for a few minutes. And it says to wet the molds. That is crucial. So I just sort of rinsed them out. And now I'm going to pour the mixture into the molds. So let's see. I'm not sure how much. Okay. Gently. I imagine you want it all the way full. I have a knife to sort of smooth it into position. It's very interesting. Okay, and then it says you have to put it into the refrigerator overnight. So I imagine that if you didn't have ice, this would have been a dessert made only in winter. So that's kind of why I selected it. I think I have not enough for this big mold, but let's see if we can get, let's see how much we have left. Yeah. Do this one too. That will make my family very happy. They always like to try out these concoctions. And although it is shown in the book with blueberries and raspberries in Jane Austen's time, you would have not have had those two ingredients in December. So I am opting to top it with the homemade cranberry jelly. I think that'll be good. So I'll just kind of shake it into place again. Okay, so that's pretty good. These molds, as you can see in comparison to my hand, that's how much this recipe makes. So that's great. I'm gonna transfer them to the refrigerator and we will see how it works out tomorrow morning.
Hello everybody that's joining. We are so happy that you're joining me and Laura Ingalls-Gunn for our Regency discussion today about Regency food and 12th night celebrations. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. Hi everyone. Hello Jane Austen fans. I'm Laura Ingalls-Gunn and I met Tiffany, was it last year, through the Dallas-Fort Worth Costumers Guild
Through Instagram,
and Instagram,
largely,
yeah. And we just hit it off because we both love literature. I think we're both particularly crazy about Jane Austen, all things Austen. I had lived in Europe for 4 years with my husband, and our son was born in Germany, and my husband still has family that live in England in the county of Surrey. And my background is I have a degree in interior design and art history. So historical decorating is my jam. I love it, I love it, I love it.
And this is why I invited her for this specific video, because she also is a great cook. She's a great cook, and she does amazing decorating. If you do not follow her on Decor to Adore, definitely follow her. She gives you all kinds of really good ideas about how to decorate and decorate low cost. So my own sister is following her now and taking some of her ideas. So.
Yes, I know. I was so excited, and I'm just thrilled to be here. So
yes,
thank
you. And we're actually at her gorgeous house. So these decorations are all her, not me.
Yeah.
But I wanted to continue in our live series along with the Pride and Prejudice designs that I just launched. So hopefully you've been able to see those in my Instagram stories and on my Instagram feed, and check them out in the Etsy shop. There's some samples still available at a low cost. And then also I wanted to do this one this month because it's kind of in conjunction with the holiday season. So most of our holiday traditions come from the Victorians. So if you are looking for something a little different for your holiday season this year, you might want to check out some of the Regency holiday traditions that we'll be talking about today, and the Regency foods if you want to kind of mix it up this year. So without further ado, let's get started on our questions. Let's see, I had a list of questions.
I love it that you're prepared.
All right, so why don't you go ahead and tell us about which recipes you decided to try?
Oh, now I hope everybody is going to giggle about this, but the very first recipe that I was immediately drawn to was, I believe it is pronounced Negus. It's also known as mulled wine here in America, Glühwein in Germany, and I also sort of did some research. Wassail, if you're familiar with that term, here we come a wassailing. Wassail is actually a spiced cider, and Negus is the spiced wine. But what really gave me a giggle is in the recipe book, they had pulled it, I believe it was originally in Mrs. Beeton's, but during the 1800s, this was a party drink that they served to children.
Wow.
And it does have a lot of sugar and citrus that's added to it, and cinnamon, and it does taste delicious. So I'm thinking, well, the sugar high was combated by the potency of the port, but that just really gave me a giggle that it was actually a children's drink. And so if our Instagram Live gets sillier and sillier as the time goes on, now you know.
Yes.
And it is delicious.
Oh, let me taste it. And then your other recipe?
So the second recipe that I selected is called flummery. And the reason why I selected it is during the Regency era, gelatin-based savory dishes and gelatin-based desserts were extremely popular. And I have a series of 3 antique molds that my friend Nicola, who lives in England, had sent me a few years ago because she knows I'm a big old history nerd and would actually use these. So I thought that that would be really interesting for your viewers to see an actual mold that would have been used. And so I have 3 different sizes, and the recipe that I made in conjunction with this, I am filming a YouTube video that shows the preparation of me making the recipes, and that'll be up on my channel next Friday. So it went together. No, I followed it step by step, and it had to set overnight in the refrigerator. So this morning, and I followed everything step by step, but when I went to go turn it over, it was like cement in the mold. And so if anybody has any advice, because I had tasted it, it is delicious. And we just slapped some jelly on top of it. So it doesn't look as pretty as what they show in the recipe book. And you know, my cousin Tara, her mother, Linda, who we call Nene, says if it's ugly, it tastes good. So
that's right.
we're gonna enjoy some flummery, and it is cream based.
Okay.
And I didn't know it had said to use gelatin leaves, and I'm like, gelatin leaves. So that was a big hunt, and I'll talk about that in the video, like where I finally found gelatin leaves, what they looked like. So the proof will be in the pudding. So I think we should
Taste it.
try and taste it. And I've paired it with a strawberry jam. It recommends that you pair it with fruit, but we have to think about that in Jane's time. Everything that we have so available to us in the grocery store, that was not the case. Everything was seasonal. So you would have not had your strawberries and blueberries and raspberries to pair this with. They would have paired it with the jam that they had prepared and preserved.
Right.
So
Very nice. Yes, it's delicious.
it is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
That's
wash
really
it
good.
down with some Negus.
Yes, definitely. Just keep drinking this all day.
Yes, absolutely. And on a cold day, because of course this is December, and in England it's chilly, so to have that warm drink, that's definitely something
That would help.
that Jane would have loved.
So I chose my recipes from another book by Penn Vogler. I actually have both of these books, Dinner with Mr. Darcy and Tea with Jane Austen. Not Penn Vogler. Oh yeah, it is Penn Vogler, sorry. I think I put it wrong in one of the stories and I said Penn Vogler. And so I let Laura borrow the Dinner with Mr. Darcy to choose from, and I chose from the tea book. So I chose 2. I chose the Gingerbread. And the reason I chose the gingerbread is because my family has always made gingerbread mint. That's something we've always done at Christmas. We use my Nana's recipe. And so I wanted to see how historical gingerbread was different from my Nana's recipe, which hers, of course, dates from mid-20th century. So
Yeah, that's really good. And
I told Laura, I think I rolled them just a little thicker than you're supposed to. So if you make the recipe, definitely roll them really, really thin. But it is very tasty. It has caraway seeds in it.
okay, I was wondering, it was a little bit different than the gingerbread that I think we as modern taste sensibilities are familiar with.
Right.
Was there any molasses in this? Okay.
And that's what I was going to talk about next. So it calls for black treacle. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Treacle. And when I researched it, it said blackstrap molasses is your closest bet. And I thought I had blackstrap molasses because I was raised with a mother who was very natural. So I'm very familiar with blackstrap molasses. But somehow I had run out of my stash. And so I happen to have some of the grandma's molasses that you can find at the grocery store. So if you use blackstrap, I bet it would be stronger because it's not as strong as if you use blackstrap.
And you know, I kind of love a more soft cookie versus a crunchy cookie. So by you rolling it a little bit thicker,
That's true.
that's my preference. So I guess whatever your preference is, you can make it your own.
You can also add more ginger, but I went ahead and just did the 2 teaspoons. The recipe says if you like it a little stronger, use 3. And I like the 2 teaspoons. I don't think I would add the 3rd one. So my other one that I chose is buns. I had to choose some buns because they are mentioned all the time. And so I chose the butter buns. Look at these gorgeous butter buns.
I can't wait. Get on my plate and in my belly.
And I will tell you, normally it says in the recipe book they would split them and toast them and serve them with butter in their evening tea. However, we're just going to eat them like this. I did cheat and taste test one last night when it was still warm, and it was so
Oh my
good.
goodness.
Yes. I'm also extremely proud of myself on these buns because I hand kneaded them. I never hand knead things because I have a Bosch, and so it always kneads for me, but I was in the spirit of the era, trying to stay historically accurate somewhat, and so I hand kneaded them, and I was pleasantly surprised when they came out light and airy.
Oh, they are delicious. Is there spices? I taste.
There's caraway again, rose water, and currants, and allspice.
Allspice. You know, it's interesting. As I love this cookbook, by the way, and I actually ordered it as a Christmas gift for one of my cousins who's also really loves all things Jane. And one thing that just over and over that I noticed is they relied more on spices than a lot of our recipes do today.
Right. The interesting thing on these buns is that it was actually optional to put in the spices. They, the recipe, I can't remember which historical author they got it from, but they got it from a historical recipe, of course. And the original didn't have spices in it, but then they did some cross research, and there was another cookery advisor that said, put in these spices. So that's why I went ahead and put in spices, because I was like, let's try it with the spices. So I love it.
Perfect for the season. That's delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so what is the connection between each recipe and Jane Austen? What was the connection on yours?
Okay, so for me, when I think about the ball at Netherfield, and generally during that time, and Jane is very good about writing that when they had these balls, it wasn't just dancing for a few hours. You know, it would go all night, and they would have full dinners like at midnight. And you know, so many times Mr. Collins and Lady Catherine, when they're talking about food, and it's really, I think, one of the things that Jane Austen does well. And so this, the Negus, they would have, I'm sure, had the spiced wine, even if it was maybe the last course as people were getting to leave in their carriages, because it also warms you.
Right.
The alcohol warms you as well as the warmth of the beverage. And flummery, that I just selected, you know, in Emma, there's the scene where the girls are gathered together with the sugar mold, and they had packed the sugar in a mold, and so I don't think she ever mentioned flummery specifically, but I selected it because of the mold.
So the gingerbread ties to Emma as well. There is a part in Emma where it talks about she was waiting for, I believe, Harriet at one point.
Yes.
And she noticed the kids were gathered around the baker's window looking at the gingerbread. These specific type of buns, as far as I know, are not mentioned directly in Jane Austen's works, but buns are mentioned on a regular basis and were always a feature at their teas. And so I just chose them because they are always mentioned, and I was the most interested in making this style of buns. Some of the others, I think there was bath buns in the recipe books. Those are directly mentioned in one of her works. Rout cakes, Sally Lunn buns, all of those are in the cookbook as well, and those are directly mentioned in her works. This kind is not, but they look the most appealing to me to try. So that is the connection between those, my recipes.
Really great selections.
Right. Well, thank you. Yours are great too. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Twelfth Night and how to celebrate and decorate?
I love Twelfth Night.
I'm going to check the comments while you're doing that.
And yes, so sadly, a lot of people aren't even familiar with what Twelfth Night is. And that, I'm sure most of us have heard of the carol, The 12 Days of Christmas.
Right.
And for the 12 Days of Christmas actually begins on Christmas Day. And more so in Europe, but my grandmother, her mother was an immigrant from Germany, they did not decorate their tree until Christmas Eve because, you know, they wanted to keep the greenery fresh, and bringing in the greens or the hanging of the greens was something that they would do on Christmas Eve, and it actually would last all the way through February. And they did this because the first day of Christmas, December 25th, culminates in Twelfth Night, which is also known as Epiphany, or in Latin American countries, my husband was born and raised in Panama, it's Three Kings Day. And that is still a widely celebrated holiday. But for those 12 days, particularly in the era of Jane Austen, there were balls, there were dinners, there were sleigh rides, and so you would have a house full of people. Now, during the era of Jane Austen, that was really the time period that people started bathing on a daily basis. And what I mean by that is full bath submersion. And that is in part to Beau Brummel, who is a notorious Regency era dandy. Much has been written about. He was actually considered to be quite an eccentric for taking a full submersion bath. And so prior to that, the thought was, you know, perspiration actually created a layer on your skin that then germs could not penetrate. We know a little bit better now. And if you were going to bathe, you would probably take a cold water bath. And so we think about in Persuasion, Mary takes a sea bath in November. And if you have ever been near the water in England in November, you will have an icicle dripping. And I always wondered, why is she doing a sea bath in November? So you have all of these people in your house. Bathing was a little bit different than what we know of today. Also, too, whereas we have electricity, during the winter, things were darker.
Right.
And so by bringing in the greens with their beautiful pine fragrance, and then the bright color of the berries, and you have, my holly berry wasn't blooming yet, But this is St. John's wort, which would have also been plentiful. They actually used that as a medicinal property as well. So boughs of holly, fa la 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 la, your pine, and they would create the wreaths like you see behind Tiffany. And then they would also create the garlands of the little crab apples and the cranberries to bring in color, to help lighten what might be overcast, gloomy. And so our traditional pairing, when we think of Christmas and the Christmas colors, green and red, come from the greens and the berries. And so the Christmas tree would not really come into fashion until Victoria. She married Prince Albert, who came from Germany, and the Christmas tree has its origins from Germany. But I wanted to include...
I don't think they can see it.
Yes, that's fine.
Let me move it so they can see there. She's going to show you something.
So on this particular tree, you have the candles that are attached to the branches with little clips. And again, you know, by cutting down a fresh tree and only putting it up on Christmas Eve. But one thing that they did do during Jane Austen's era is often at a place setting or a dinner, there would be these cones that they could either hang off of the chair or put on the place setting, and then they would be filled with nuts. Some of them are filled with oranges and pomegranates, so those would all be things that you could find in December. And that was actually a really elaborate gift during the era of Jane Austen. You know, again, we don't think about that oranges and nuts were a rarity.
Right.
This was something very, very special. It was expensive. And so that would be a gift that was, you were honored if you were to receive. Now, other gifts that they might put is, if you are a child, going back to Epiphany, the three kings and the journey that they took to Bethlehem, you might receive hand-carved camels.
Very nice.
You know, out of wood.
I think your peppermint
yes,
went under your chin.
and I'm gonna let Tiffany, because that's actually one of Tiffany's gift that I would have given you for coming to my home.
Very nice.
So this is what the peppermint, so you can go ahead and unwrap it.
Okay.
And you know, you would have been given a stick of candy. It looks a little bit different from the candy canes that we have today. So, and then another little thing that might be given if it was a tea that we were enjoying, twofold. As a woman, I took every opportunity I could to share my needleworking skills as a gift, and a little Christmas bird had told me that purple is one of your favorite colors.
Are you serious? You are
and so this is a handkerchief for Tiffany, and other gifts might be little thread or a bottle of perfume. It would not
Look at
have
this
been
gorgeous handkerchief, y'all.
It would not have been the elaborate gifts that we have today.
Right.
It would have been maybe just one gift, and it was handcrafted and very heartfelt. And so every day, you know, you may have a nativity scene, and the camels and the wise men are moving ever closer to the stable. And so the 12th night is the the culmination of this 12-day Christmas ceremony, and it's usually a grand dinner to celebrate and close friends and family. But it's just a really wonderful event. And I know so many people, because the commercialism, particularly here in America, you know, the day after Halloween, they strip the stores and start playing the Christmas carols. That's all commercialism. They just want you to buy. And so we've somewhat been conditioned that the day after Christmas, we're supposed to yank down our Christmas tree. And a lot of people have talked about, you know, they fall into a deep depression after that because you've had such merriment. Well, a few years ago, our family decided that we were going to start celebrating the full 12 days of Christmas. And it's nothing big. Sometimes it's staying in our pajamas and watching movies all day, or another day it's getting in the car to drive around and look at Christmas lights, or, you know, just enjoying that full special time. And we did have our Epiphany feast that I did make a YouTube video about it, that you can see our table last year, and we opted to do the Victorian era. So there's a few different trends, but Jane and her family, particularly given that, you know, her father and brother were in the ministry, they very much would have observed the 12 days of Christmas and Epiphany. It would have been a time of joyful merrymaking.
And I like the connection that she makes, because I was thinking that while she was talking, you know, if you're looking to do a more like eco-friendly Christmas,
absolutely.
or you're looking to do a be more earth-friendly in your gift giving, right?
Yes.
These are great traditions to start using, because all of these things, like you have the fruit and the candy and the nuts and things, those are consumables, right, that people will eat, and not going out with big and elaborate gifts, but doing something small and meaningful, as well as the just the, like she was talking about, the little celebrations to keep everybody's spirits up for those 12 days. One of the things I found that was interesting, now I don't know near as much about this as Laura, so she is the guru.
I know.
And I will be posting her links. She sent me all the links from when her family has done this in the past, so I'll be posting all those links in my stories here shortly. But one of the things I found was really interesting was that 12th night, they would often do masquerade balls.
Yes.
And everybody would be assigned a character. Now, some sources say that the person that got to be the king was the person that found the bean in the special cake that they would eat. And so then some people would be the queen. And if you Google it, there's a pretty big amount of sources that come up pretty quickly of a lot of the common characters. And I was like, that would be so much fun. So maybe in future years, I'm going to have to plan a masquerade ball for 12th night.
Well, because also too, you know, I was talking about how it went into February and the celebrations. So when you ate the king cake on 12th night, and it might be a bean, but they also made little tiny, sometimes they were pewter, sometimes they were china figurines that they also baked into the cake. And you can find those in antique stores, eBay, if you really wanted to go full Jane. And whoever had received that, then they would perhaps become the king or the queen of Mardi Gras, which it all ties in together.
Question is, what was your favorite food? And I'll go first because Laura's dealing with technology for a minute.
Yes, technology, love it.
So I am torn, honestly. Like, I really love the buns, guys, and I'm not just saying that because I'm proud of myself for eating them.
They're my favorite.
But the Negus is really, really good too. And I don't know if my sister's watching right now or not, but this is a drink my sister would love. I'm gonna have to make it for her sometime. But it is so good. So if you have these cookbooks or are buying these cookbooks, definitely try those 2 recipes first. What's your favorite?
Definitely the buns. I could really see them being toasted. As you said, that would send me over the moon with a spot of tea. What a pick-me-up that would be. The texture. It is perfect texture for a wintry bun. You know, the Sally Lunn bun is more of a spongy light, but this is a bit more dense and hearty, which is what you want in the wintertime. It's like, I want to shove the whole thing in my mouth. Hurry.
It doesn't help that we didn't eat breakfast before we did this either, so we're both like, once this is done, we're going to be eating.
Let me make sure again that it's my favorite. Oh, it is.
Yes, definitely. And then my final question is, how did like baking all of this and researching like Twelfth Night and all of that, how does it help you understand Jane Austen's works better? Like her characters and her conflicts and plots and all those different fun literary things.
So the interesting thing in making the flummery was that there is several steps involved, and they even specifically tell you how to prepare whole almonds, to blanch them, to make sure that they are ground with a bit of rose water, and I cheated. I cheated.
Don't we all sometimes?
Because I'm sure many of you can relate. This time of year, I had 3 different events yesterday, so and I had to make sure that the flummery set overnight, and so I bought blanched ground almonds, and then the preparation of after the cream and the gelatin leaves and the spices were brought to almost a boil. You had to let it cool, and the almond flour had been added to it, and then you had to pour it through a cheesecloth. Well, I didn't have any cheesecloth, but I did have a lightweight, almost to this texture of the napkins, of a linen tea towel. So I draped that over the bowl, because basically you're just wanting to eliminate any of the larger bits of the flour that may be, because you want almost a translucent appearance for your gelatin. And it really wasn't going through the linen very well. So then I was like squeezing it. My hands were clean, you know, and it was, if you've ever milked a cow, it was kind of like, and both my husband and daughter came in and they were like, what in the world? And yeah, and so that dish, if you did it in the manner of Jane, and again, she would have been cooking over an open hearth. No wonder those women were in the kitchen all day. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was interesting. Okay, I had to think about the infamous Mr. Collin line about the boiled potatoes, and how Miss Bennet so offendedly responds and is like, we are perfectly well off enough to keep a cook. And when I was making these buns and these cookies, which sounds fairly simple, like if you offer nowadays to take buns and cookies to a potluck, you swing by the grocery store and grab a bag or grab a container of cookies. Even if you're making them yourself, like you can throw them in the machine and knead them and all those different things. But I was just thinking about that, and I was thinking that's probably part of the reason she was saying that is because they had the cook, it gave her and her daughters time to work on womanly things like the needlework and visiting and things like that, as opposed to constantly being tied down in the kitchen. Because the other thing, and I didn't have time to research the answer to this question, because it mentions that scene in Emma about the gingerbread, I'm wondering how much did they buy from the bakers on your baked goods, and how much did they or their cooks take care of themselves? I would love to research, but like I said, that's a question that just occurred to me this morning, and I didn't have time to fully research it before we went live. So if you know the answer to that or have any leads on research, I would love to know what you have to say about that. So, but this, yes, very enlightening, very interesting.
Yes.
And just like the differences in the spices, and like you were saying, they wouldn't have the fresh fruit available, and how they use the spices to kind of flavor things so much.
Well, and the other thing that really stood out to me, because I poured over this cookbook, I really took my time in selecting what recipe I wanted to make. And there are a lot of wonderful savory dishes that I probably will be making, in the future. And I think for us today, when we talk about that we're eating chicken, for many of us, that just means the breast of chicken. Right. Or there's a recipe for calf's foot jelly. Mm-hmm. Well, that was a thing, and they would have used every scrap of that animal. And I think, again, going back to it being more ecological, that they used everything, the organs. There's a few recipes that there were cuts of meat. I had no idea what that cut of meat meant. I had to research it, and I'm like, I've never tasted that, so that was really interesting that they didn't waste anything.
Right, definitely. Well, we have to, because we are costumers, close by talking just a minute about our clothing before we end this live. So do you want to tell them just a little bit about your outfit and the historical fashion history?
Yes, particularly if someone was in the kitchen, they would have worn a cap, and that kept, and it probably, they would have tucked in their curls. I kind of looked like, I don't know, great Aunt Josephine from Little Women, but that's the wrong era. Without the curls, without the curls around my face, I sort of needed that softening. But you very much would have had your head covered, because number one, it keeps the hair out of your face. You're dealing with an open hearth, and but also too, it helped to keep your hair clean, because you're dealing with the soot from and all manner of plucking a chicken. There's feathers, and so it's going to help keep. It serves a variety of purposes, and fabric was very expensive, and they may have only had 2, 3, if they were wealthier, maybe a few more dresses, but they would have worn the apron to protect the clothing. And by using the white, because you think about the laundry that they were boiling, and the lye-based soaps, which are very harsh.
Right.
The white was easy to kind of just keep really clean and through laundering. So these two items, they would have probably changed on a daily basis, I'm thinking. Right.
Also, because not only is it winter here and it's cooler here, but think about how cold and clammy England can be. I did a lot of research about why they wore some of the layers they did, and why they wore the caps all the time, and it was partly just to keep you warm. And also for women, as they got older, it was also something that they could cover up their graying hair, or they could cover up if they had bald spots on their head or different things like that. So that was also a reason that they often wore the caps, and then of course they would put the bonnet on top of it when they went outside. Laura is better dressed than me for the occasion, because I have every plan to show you guys how to turn not only this dress into a working class outfit, but also how to winterize it, but that has not happened yet. I've been filling orders like crazy. And so I will eventually show you one day. So my cap is actually not Regency. It is actually mid-Victorian, but it was the only cap I had. So I figured a cap was better than no cap. So you'll have to forget that. Also, I wanted to point out that she has like a neck scarf or a tucker, and I have a chemise on. We always think of Regency with the really low necks, right? But the only time they actually showed all of that was when they went to the when they went to the balls and in the evenings. Otherwise, partly once again because of the cold chill, even in the houses when they're running fireplaces, they would wear this to cover up and help keep warm, or if it's the summertime to protect themselves from sun, all of those different things. So that was also a very essential part of any Regency woman's wardrobe. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. Laura's YouTube channel is Laura Ingalls Gunn,
Yes.
right? So find her on YouTube and subscribe and wait for her video on Friday.
On Friday. So Fridays on my YouTube channel is generally Fashion Fridays. It is anything from the earliest I've made is late 1700s, all the way up. Tiffany and I, our next collaboration is going to be 1940s. So I'm looking forward to that.
Super excited. That's the challenge that is put on by Vintage Guidebook and a couple of others for World War II Sewing Challenge. So if you are into mid-century, definitely check out that challenge on the Vintage Guidebooks channel. She was my last guest on IG Live.
Yes, that was a great.
Yes.
And you can still watch them.
Oh yeah, they're all saved.
Okay.
All of these save underneath the IGTV on my account. And thank you guys so much for joining. I'm going to check comments one more time before we end this. And thank you, James, for all your comments and for being here. Let's see. We have, we do have a couple more comments. Let's see what they have to say. James said beautiful tree. Did we cook in costume? No, we did not, Emily. We cheated on that. I don't think you didn't cook in costume, did you?
No, again, I did wear the same neckerchief. Does that count?
That counts, definitely counts. But no, we did not cook in costume. Bleaching in the sun, Summerbird Crochet says we could bleach the whites in the sun. So yes, and then my next series will be with Penn's Abigail in January. We'll be discussing the name of a book, which I always forget. I think it's called something about life in the Regency period. It's also known as Eavesdropping in Jane Austen's England or something like that. So definitely stay tuned for that. I've already started reading it and I am amazed by some of the information in this book. So please don't miss that. Thank you guys once again for joining and we will see you guys in the future. Bye.
Bye-bye.